Sympathy is a word that we're familiar with. We show sympathy when someone is suffering from a loss or a hardship or some sort of illness. We express sympathy to let them know that we're with them. They're not alone. And yet, sympathy has a short shelf life in many ways, because after we visit someone, we can go about our regular routine and pick up where we left off, and in many ways not really have a sense that we've bonded with that person other than that moment. But another word that we have that allows us to make that kind of connection with another is empathy. Empathy is not just about being with someone in their suffering, but actually experiencing the hardship, the suffering, the turmoil that they're going through. We identify with it and we connect with them on a very deep human level of our own vulnerability and mortality in a way that is a great comfort to people when we have that kind of relationship and connection. Jesus seems to be a person who understands what empathy is about. He suffers with those who are lost, as we hear in the gospel today. And we remember that scene in which he comes to the tomb of Lazarus and he groans in the spirit, as John the evangelist tells us. Jesus had that capacity to connect with people at that very deep human level. And in doing so, he reveals to us that God, too, has that capacity, connects with us in our suffering, experiences our suffering. That should be a great encouragement to us, to realize not only that God is with us, but that God suffers with us. God knows what we're suffering in life. And in that way, understand how deeply connected we are to God, that He has sent His Son into the world to reveal to us that connection. But I also think that it's important for us, as we examine our own spiritual life, to develop that capacity to have empathy for people who are suffering. So many times every day we see across the newspaper headlines or across the screen of our TV of people who are suffering here in our city because of gunshots or their life taken, or across the world where there are war and calamities. And we kind of numb ourselves after a while. We think it's somewhat routine. And yet, in our own spiritual life, we need to look at ways in which we're going to develop that capacity to really connect with people and have a share in the sufferings that will motivate us to do something about the difficulties in our world, to make sure that we also take time to pray for them, to bring to our prayer the request that God give us a taste of the sufferings of others so that we can pray for them in a way that's very devout, in a way that asks God to connect with them in their suffering and help them in their need. I think it's important for us in our city, our country, and our world today, for every human being to have a little more empathy for the rest of the world, people who are suffering. Maybe it's the solution, a pathway for us to deal with the great divide that we have in our country, the polarization that leaves us in many ways apart from each other, to realize we all share a common vulnerability in life, that we all have need of each other, and the way that we understand that is to be able to suffer with others in a way that connects with them. I think our world will be in a better place, and surely we will be in a better place with our spiritual lives the more that we develop the capacity for empathy, because it is a very trait of God, a very characteristic of God, that God not only shows us sympathy, but empathy. God suffers with us in our need. And the more that we develop that capacity, the more then we will be like God.